Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this special event on unlocking financial resources for investments in climate change and energy transition. I'm delighted to introduce our opening speakers, our COP27 host, Her Excellency, the Egyptian Minister of International Cooperation, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, Dr. Mohammed Suleiman Al-Jasser, President and Chairman of the Islamic Development Bank Group, and Dr. Abdulhamid Al-Khalifa, Director General of the OPEC Fund for International Development. My name is Nadia Benamara. I'm Director of Communications for the OPEC Fund. And together with our co-hosts, the IsDB, and trusted partners, we will be exploring several new angles on climate financing, which put a premium on partnerships and innovation. And we will kick off today with a historic announcement from the Arab Coordination Group, who are committing a multi-billion-dollar package to ensure a just, inclusive, affordable, and equitable energy transition. I understand we have a very brief video to introduce the Arab Coordination Group, also known as the ACG, and what they do. Could you please play the video now? Please play the video.
Global challenges, evolving economic realities, and population growth are placing increased demand on nations worldwide. For almost 50 years, the Arab Coordination Group, ACG, has united in support of a brighter, more equitable future for developing nations and their people. We are a strategic alliance of 10 national and regional institutions with a shared vision of helping uplift nations through global collaboration, project financing, and technical assistance. As one of the largest donor groups by combined financial resources, we focus on delivering sustainable impact to improve the prospects of communities worldwide. From innovative infrastructure financing to funding youth and women's empowerment programs, we are invested in creating long-term outcomes that support inclusive, social, and economic development. We are proud of what we have achieved over our 50 years, and we are committed to continued collaboration to support an equitable future. Together, we achieve greater impact. Together, we are ACG.
Thank you. I would like to now invite Dr. Jasser to deliver his remarks. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellency, our distinguished host, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, Minister of International Cooperation of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Your Excellencies, guests, brothers, sisters, partners in this process of development, members of the Arab Coordination Group, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed honored to welcome you all on this momentous occasion. The Islamic Development Bank and members of the Arab Coordination Group have committed to increasing financing to address climate impact and invest in low carbon footprint alternatives for energy, transport, and other development sectors. We are therefore proud to announce today the commitment of the Arab Coordination Group to ramp up its cumulative climate finance to at least $24 billion. Yes. To cover the years 2023-2030. Such investments are in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris commitments of our member countries and clients. Ladies and gentlemen, the global shocks caused by COVID-19 pandemic and as well as the crisis in Eastern Europe have compounded the effects of climate change. I call that the vicious trinity, and it is indeed a vicious one. Therefore, to better address the challenge facing our member countries, is that part of the, this is part of the show. Therefore, to better address the challenges facing our member countries, we must support them in building long-term resilience and security of their food systems. At the same time, we need to urgently support green and sustainable energy supply while recognizing the rights to a just transition and energy security to support the development pathways of our member states. In this regard, supporting the implementation of the country's nationally determined contributions, just transition plans and strategies, and long-term climate strategies and net zero plans will require better coordination from the technical and financial partners. ACG members have a critical role in better preparing our countries to achieve net zero by mid-century. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier this year, the Islamic Development Bank realigned its strategy for 2023 to 2025 and has also committed to aligning all its sovereign financial operations with the goals of the Paris Agreement by the end of 2023. This commitment comes while the bank is scaling up its climate finance shares in its operations, which in 2021 reached 31%. We have set an ambitious target to have at least 35% of our financing as climate finance by 2025. The bank is also pledging to approve a minimum of $13 billion in adaptation and mitigation finance during the course 2023-2030. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate adaptation is one of the major challenges facing Africa. This COP of Africa has identified it as a priority, and yet we all recognize that more needs to be done to prevent the devastating impacts of climate change, such as the floods in Nigeria and Pakistan this year, or the drought that struck the Horn of Africa and Madagascar. To collectively help our member countries and clients bridge the vast investment gap in adaptation and resilience, the ACG institutions must invest and cooperate in innovative financial solutions using a blended finance approach to catalyze private sector investment. More concessional finance will need to be leveraged and mobilized to support communities and climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture, water, and sanitation in our member countries. In addition, particular consideration must be given to the neediest of the least developed countries and small island developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the Islamic Development Bank is proud to support the Arab Coordination Group. Is that your plane? I guess the Arab Coordination Group has a plane. So every time I mention the name, it comes. The Islamic Development Bank is proud to support the Arab Coordination Group Declaration on Climate Action. As the global leading Islamic finance development institution, the Islamic Development Bank is ready to walk the talk, along with other members of the ACG, to increase its climate action in member countries and to lead by example. Thank you, and I wish you a good discussion, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Alkhalifa from the OPEC Fund.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellency, Minister of International Cooperation, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to this joint event with our friends and partners from the Arab Coordination Group, the Islamic Development Bank, IsDB, and the United Nations Capital Development Fund. This year's CAB is entitled Delivering for People and the Planet, and the Egyptian presidency of the event has also dubbed it as the Implementation Summit. We have all seen recent warnings that the world is not on track to meet the Paris climate targets. Most recently, the UN urged that the supply of electricity from clean energy sources need to be doubled by 2030, or else climate change will threaten our energy security, because the energy sector is the source of around 3/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for action is now, and that is what we are doing today. Today, we are announcing, as Mr. Al-Jasser mentioned, a 24 billion facility provided by the Arab Coordination Group in support of climate action. This multi-billion package has been designed to benefit vulnerable economies, to fill gaps in national roadmaps for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. As a head of the OPEC Fund, I am particularly grateful of my colleagues from the Arab Coordination Group for this joint effort. And I am also proud that our institutions were able to play a pioneering role. The OPEC Fund adopted its own climate action plan in September with ambitious targets. Our goal is to double the share of climate finance to 40% of all new approvals by 2030, and to mainstream climate action into our project cycle. Already, we are seeing the impacts of this new direction in our pipeline. And first projects under the Climate Action Plan are coming quickly. We recently approved 120 million loan to Panama to support climate action. Our engagement builds on our traditional involvement in the energy sector. Over the years, we have built a substantial portfolio of renewable projects, which by now equals about 1/3 of our investment in this sector. Prominent examples are the Komombo solar plant in Egypt and Seven Sisters projects in Jordan. Ladies and gentlemen, addressing climate change is urgent, but we must do it in a way that is compatible with combating energy poverty. We acknowledge the combined challenges of growing energy crisis, record greenhouse gas emissions, and extreme weather events. And it is evident that the most vulnerable people and fragile economies are most severely affected. The ACG Climate Facility responds to this challenge by offering countries support in achieving universal access to, quote, affordable, sustainable, reliable, and modern, unquote, energy services in line with SDG 7, while accelerating the transition toward net zero emissions. We will help countries by providing financing while also responding to requests for support with updating policy and regulatory frameworks. Here, our key premise is that climate action and development must be integrated, not only to enable successful climate mitigation and adaptation, but also to ensure that economic development is sustainable. Given the size of the task, climate action more than ever requires close and coordinated cooperation between the public and private sectors, as well as the MDBs, the largest contributors to the climate finance. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, this is a historic package, not only because of the very significant amount of finance it provides, but also because of its multiple dimensions. This is not a statement of intent. This is a plan of action to move from greening projects to greening entire economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Dr. Al-Mashat.
Thank you very much, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I want to salute my two very close colleagues and friends. I feel always tremendously welcomed when I'm among the Arab Coordination Group. This is a group of action. We, as the government of Egypt, not just being the host of COP, but also being one of the countries that works very closely with all the funds, I can attest that the coordination is in action, really. When we do projects with all of you, these are projects that are well coordinated, that are well executed, and I have to also salute all your teams that have actually encouraged you to make this pledge, because you can make a pledge, but unless you have soldiers on the ground, it will be very difficult to implement. So I want to salute them for the hard work, but also for the passion for the topics that you mentioned. Both Dr. Gasser, both Dr. Abdulhamid mentioned adaptation, mentioned the link between SDGs, development, climate. Today they are so intertwined, and one of the successes of meetings such as COP is to make sure that the narrative across policymakers, private sector, financing institutions is unified. And I think that today, whenever we attend, be it meetings where we're negotiating, meetings where we're discussing, meetings where we're thinking about innovative solutions, this link between climate action, between development, and trying to fill in the SDG gap, as you rightly mentioned, renewable energy, SDG number 7, if we think of it as a development criteria affecting people positively, it is also adding to climate action. It is such an important announcement today, $24 billion, which are going to be for climate action, extremely important. This is an implementation COP. And something else which is key, Dr. Gasser, you mentioned innovative financing tools. Crowding in the private sector has become the name of the game. We can sit down and debate if the $100 billion that was pledged in 2015 made it or not. Everybody knows that we need more. And this more cannot come only from public finances, cannot only come from private sector. There has to be this combination for de-risking, particularly given the very difficult global backdrop that we see. Thank you very much for this pledge. You mentioned it's not a pledge, it's an actionable plan. Thank you for all the members of the Arab Coordination Group. We were welcomed at the OPEC Fund during June in Vienna, and we saw the impact that your message has across different other development partners, and you have become extremely instrumental in trying to unlock a lot of the finances that are in other pockets. And I'm sure that with this new pledge that you have, this is going to also open new horizons that benefit the people in the different countries in the region, and all of this with the planet as the final destination for all of us. As the host country, we cannot be more happy because, again, COPs are being measured always by how much is being done together, and this is together for implementation. And let me, be a little bit monopolistic and mention Egypt's country platform for the nexus of water, food, and energy, the NUWAFI program. And of course, we chose the name NUWAFI because it is NUWAFI بالتعهدات, and trying to move from pledges to implementation. Many of you are partners with us in the NUWAFI program, and this is a platform that has grants, concessional finance, debt swaps, technical advisory, all of this to bring in the private sector. And I want to thank the Arab Coordination Group for always being mindful with the grant component to actually upgrade the projects that will see the $24 billion in action. The initial part of any success with projects is this technical advisory that is able to make it implementable. And this is one of the key features of your institutions, and I think this has to be more pronounced, and something that you distinguish yourself by this grant component. And even if there's another development partner that's going to do the project, there is no shying back of being supportive at the very beginning. And this is a unique feature of the hospitality of the Arabs, I have to say. So with this, I just want to congratulate you and tell you that we as COP presidency extremely happy that this is happening in Sharm el-Sheikh from the Arab world. We have 2 COPs consecutively from the Arab world, which is extremely significant. It's also a COP from the south. So all these requirements of adaptation, of looking at food security, water security are even more pronounced, and your pledge comes hand in hand in that. Thank you very much, and we will be looking together over the next 12 months how we can activate the 24 billion, and thanks for everybody who has your leadership and everybody who has been behind this to see it to light. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again for this amazing commitment. I'd like to introduce, we will have 2 panel discussions today. I'd like to introduce our first one, which will be hosted by the Islamic Development Bank Group on Islamic finance, an innovative financing approach for driving low carbon and resilient development. I'd like to invite my colleague to come to the stage to introduce the panel. Ms. May Atahir Babakar, manager of the Islamic Development Bank's regional hub in Cairo. Thank you very much. Excellency, I invite you to take your seats. Would you like, sure.
No, she's following up with the others. So I'll go and see her.
She said today. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please take your seats to start the session? Okay. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are here in the panel that is going to discuss Islamic finance and innovative financing approach for driving low carbon and resilient development. The Islamic finance industry is estimated to work over 4 trillion of assets. The Islamic Development Bank is a lead multilateral financial institution operating in this financial industry, which has an enormous role to play in the transition effort of countries to a green economy. The panel today will highlight the various innovative mechanisms offered by Islamic finance industry and its actors, which are beneficial to drive towards low carbon and climate resilient development of the beneficiary communities. Experiences from Islamic finance institutions mainstreaming climate action in their strategies will be discussed, in addition to the roles of different development partners in this area. Kindly welcome the panel we have today, where we have His Excellency Mr. Sohail Nazara, who is Vice Minister of Finance Indonesia, Dr. Zamir Iqbal, Vice President Finance and CFO of the Islamic Development Bank, Mr. Paul Nomba, Regional Director of Infrastructure, Middle East and North Africa, the World Bank, Dr. Khalida Bozar, Assistant Secretary General, the Regional Director of the Regional Bureau of the Arab States of UNDP, and Mr. Eric Asher, the Head of UNEP-FI. I hope that we have everyone here. We'll start with the first question, and I think we have Mr. Eric with us. Thank you. So, Mr. Eric, I would like to have you through this, where UNEP-FI has led very important work stream of transforming the finance industry by helping address global environmental, social, and governance challenges, including their involvement in climate action. Can you please tell us, from your perspective, how you see the Islamic finance system evolving in this area, and what are the challenges and opportunities for this industry's success in unlocking climate finance? And I'm sorry we started all late, so we'll give you just like 3 minutes to answer this question. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and a pleasure to be with you and to learn of this very important announcement that's just been made. So, UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, we've been around for 30 years. We are the part of the UN working on fostering responsible financial sector. Wow. In 2019, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stood with 132 bank CEOs to launch the UN Principles for Responsible Banking. Today, they account for nearly 50% of the global banking sector. And these principles commit signatories to integrate the systems and processes needed to understand and communicate the impact of their financing, essentially the purpose of their financing. What is their role? Now, Islamic finance, I think, has socially responsible financing at its heart, and therefore has a lot to contribute in leading this responsible banking agenda and reinstilling purpose across the finance industry. Egypt has been a leader in the region on PRB uptake. We have 7 banks signatories, including CIB and QNB Al-Ali, who are also net zero committed banks. In June 2021, the Central Bank of Egypt issued voluntary guidelines on sustainable finance that reinforce these banking principles. This week, the Central Bank of Egypt issued binding regulations to enhance sustainability and sustainable finance, putting specific requirements on banks in terms of their systems and personnel they have to address these issues. We're also working with many other banks in the Islamic finance, Sharia finance space, and I think trying to bridge together what is at the center of Sharia finance, how that can be used also for wider responsible banking. We also, in the climate area, we are under the GFANZ umbrella managing the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So these are the group of banks globally who are committed to net zero by 2050 and issuing preliminary targets by 2030. Today, they've put out their first progress report. It's a total of 122 banks representing 40% of global banking assets. 62 have set targets for 2030 in areas like power generation, where they are on average projecting to be reducing emissions by 54% by 2030, and also on oil and gas, where they expect to be down 32% reductions also by 2030. Now, this timeline aligns very well with the $24 billion commitments announced today, and I think it's clear that this scale of mitigation, the private sector cannot do it on their own. They need to be working private finance with public finance together, and also very closely working with governments. And so I think the ambition is there. What's needed are the projects, the project pipelines, and the capacities to get it done. And I think really that comes to the center of what we're discussing today. How do we help work with the commercial financial industry as partners for change? I'll stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. That was precise and to the point. I turn to His Excellency on Indonesia, and we all know that Indonesia is leading in this area of Islamic finance and having a very robust and sophisticated Islamic finance systems. Can you please tell us how the Islamic finance is currently used to support the ambitious long-term low-carbon green development strategy of the country? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and also distinguished panels. 5 years ago, for a number of years, Indonesia actually already issued the sukuk in the global market. Indonesia is one of the, I think it's one of the biggest sukuk issuer on the sovereign side. And on the other hand, it is also on our agenda to make sure that the green investment is coming up from the budget. And some 7 years ago, the initiative began with, we tried to calculate from our national budget how much money that actually we spend on mitigation. And starting about 3 years ago, we started to also try to tag the budget for the budget for adaptation. So we start to have like different numbers. These are the amount that we spend on mitigation. These are the amount that we spend on the adaptation. And those are based on projects. And on 2018, we found the way that to combine the two, the green and the sukuk. So we issued the green sukuk. Bonds at that time. It was initially suggested for expanding our investors base, but then obviously it is to our encouragement to see that the green and the sukuk are very compatible. Both requires underlying, and as long as we choose the right underlying from our budget tagging projects, then it fits well. So we use the proceeds to finance the infrastructure, to finance the social protection that, especially the infrastructure projects that spread out throughout the Indonesia from the bonds. So it is well understood at these days among our investors, and we are committed to continue the issuance. Right now, the Islamic finance for the government, it is also some of the private sector. They are not yet use this as a main instrument, but then when they look at how the government actually do it, we hope that it is expanding for the use of the Islamic finance throughout the country, not only on the sovereign side but also on the corporate side. The other thing that we also introduced for the Islamic finance is that going on the retail a lot. Given the needs of financing of Indonesia, we are not only issuing the conventional bond, Islamic bonds, but also the retail bonds, and that is very encouraging to see that our new investors, our new local investors, they kind of relate with the kind of underlying that we announce, or this is for this kind of infrastructure, this is for that kind of infrastructure. So it's good to show that the financing actually is pertaining to certain purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello? Yes, thank you very much for bringing that specific dimension of Indonesia and how Islamic finance has been instrumental in this area of low carbon industry, and also looking into the issuance of green and retail sukuk at the country level. I would like to turn to Vice President Zamir of the Islamic Development Bank, and the Islamic Development Bank is leading in the area of Islamic finance globally, and I know in the past 3 years we have issued green sukuk, sustainability sukuk. So if you can tell us how the bank has evolved in this area throughout the past 5 years.
Thank you, Sister May. Islamic Development Bank is a pioneer in Islamic finance, and when it came to our issuance of mobilizing funds for our green projects in order for our member countries to benefit from the climate financing, we embarked on a journey to convert, try to tap into a market where we can go to these SRI or socially responsible investors, or to the ESG, environment, sustainability and governance investors. And I must say that we had a very good experience. Back in 2019, we developed a very robust sustainable finance framework. And although it was a very hard work, it was not easy. We had to go through and basically meet all the requirements, reporting requirements and the disclosure requirements. But after the sustainable finance framework was established, we got it rated from outside from a very prestigious independent rating agency called CISRO, and I'm very pleased to share with you that we got a medium green shade, which is same as KfW, IFC, and African Development Bank. And I think I would say that we were pleasantly surprised, because when we first time went to the market for a Euro sukuk, and that was green. And I remember we going on a road show, and that road show, some of the investors, which were institutional investors, some pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds, we met them first time, introduced them about Islamic Development Bank, introduced them about our green projects, and I was very, very impressed that they came on board. They became the first investor because they believed in their value proposition, they believed the work, the mission we were doing, and the kind of work we are doing. So from that angle, after this success, after COVID, we issued 2 sustainability sukuk. So far we have raised about $5 billion through this mechanism. I think one of the key things is our 3-year strategy from 23 to 25 has a specific emphasis on green infrastructure. So that will generate a good pool of assets for us, and we are hoping that for starting next year, we'll go back to the market, we'll be able to issue more green and sustainable sukuk. And as I said, our experience has been very good, and I'm glad that we did it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bringing us to our partner UNDP and Dr. Khalida. IsDB and UNDP have partners to establish the Global Islamic Finance and Impact Investing Platform. And today you discuss with us the Green Arab State Facility for Transition, another platform. So building on the experience from the Islamic Finance and Impact Investing Platform, can you please tell us how you see the role of Islamic finance moving forward in this, the GAFT, the new facility that you are introducing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm the only woman in the panel, so maybe you can give me double the time. Yes? If I can start by bargaining. Good morning, and thank you very much for your question. One important thing I wanted to put on that table, that there has been a major development recently in the international financial system on Islamic finance, with global Islamic assets, from what I know, estimated to reach almost 3.7 trillion by 2024. And I want to say that it's not only Muslim countries that are interested, because there is a myth that if you borrow Islamic financing, it's for your Muslim country. It's not the case. So for me, it's important. This is because Islamic finance is socially oriented, inclusive, promotes already sustainability from its core principles. So in short, it aligns perfectly with all the SDG objectives. So it's very, the SDG goals. So it's very important that I mentioned that. Now, on your question, it's not an easy one. We just came from an event where we discussed with the president of the Islamic Bank and with the World Bank and UAE this new initiative. And we already see passerelles, as we say in French, bridges between what you just mentioned. Let me maybe clarify. The Global Islamic Finance and Impact Investing Platform, GFIP, if I can shorten it, has started between you and us since 2016. And thanks to this initiative, we were able to develop few products. I don't want to describe all of them, but one thing that we had done, which is notable, is the Green Sukuk initiative with the partnerships of the Securities Commission of Malaysia with the private sector window of the Islamic Development Bank. But also we developed other products. One of them is building capacity. I think it's very important when you look at finance, very often we look at the dollars, but we don't look at the capacity that we don't have in our region and beyond, obviously. So we work together on developing, training, capacity building on Islamic, on new investment opportunities in line with the SDGs in Pakistan, Indonesia, Morocco, and Turkey. I also wanted to congratulate His Excellency, the Minister of Indonesia. We supported the sovereign Green Sukuk together, so congratulations, and we'll use Indonesia's success as a model. Now, if I go back to the Green Arab Facility for Transition that is being developed, it's about scaling up green transition across the region with three platforms: climate resilient development, energy transition, and nature-based solutions. And there will be a specific focus, and here where we can bridge on blended finance and leveraging the private sector to achieve green and just transition in the region. So we will be using the lessons learned from our experience with you on the GFIP to support financial institutions across the region. We will be building on the Indonesia example to support Kuwait Finance House. We are in discussion with them, and they are one of the largest Islamic finance institutions globally to develop a green sukuk under the GAFT. This is one example. We will also build on we will build capacity for Islamic finance and impact investing using our experience. And we are already developing a menu, as I said this morning, a menu à la carte, as we say, a menu of instruments that will benefit the GFIP and the GAF together. Some instruments I wanted to put on the table could be crowdfunding to help SMEs, risk mitigation instruments to promote renewable energy, and green investment and blended finance solution to promote low carbon solution. A final example that would show the potential of our work together. We have been approached recently, last week as a matter of fact, by the Central Bank of Iraq. They have now reached out to UNDP to help them implement a 680 million program through which they will provide interest-free loans to micro and small enterprises and households to adapt renewable energy technology and systems. So this is also another bridge that could be very useful. And I hope I was not too long. Thank you for your patience.
You have not been too long, and you have all the right being the only female.
I'm taking advantage.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I turn to Paul from the World Bank, and I know you are not an expert in Islamic finance, but working in the MENA region and working for the World Bank, definitely we have partnered a lot and we have done some work on using Islamic finance. So how do you see Islamic finance playing a role in addressing climate challenges in your infrastructure sector projects in our region?
Very good, thank you. Good afternoon to all, and it's a pleasure for me also to join this distinguished panel. And I'm very pleased to be sitting next to Zamir Iqbal, who is an Islamist finance expert, with whom we have interacted for a long time when he used to be at the World Bank. But as you rightly pointed out, I'm not an expert on that. But coming to financing and project, I can give you what is needed for financing to land in a project and get that project done. And I think that's the principle and the prerequisite are the same, whether or not you're dealing with conventional or with Islamic. You first need to have project. Because you can have the money, but if you don't have a project, you would not necessarily move one inch forward. So first of all, we are coming from a context which is made of all these multiple crises. And one of the crises which is here, and it's going to be here with us, unless we do something about it, is climate crisis, which is an emergency that we need to deal with. And for that to happen, I think we need to probably change the way we are approaching it. And I will start by saying we should not continue to look at climate transition as a cost. We need to look at climate transition as an opportunity to change the quality of growth that we are seeing happening in our countries. And I really believe that mindset is the first thing that we will deliver on your question. Second thing, coming to the World Bank. As a group, we are a multilateral development bank, as Islamic Development Bank is, and we have showcased that we have scaled up our financing for climate. Last fiscal year, which ended in June 2022, we extended $32 billion for climate-related intervention, which represent approximately 38% of the total financing outlay that the bank extended in that fiscal year. And this came from IBRD and IDA and IFC and MIGA, and I'm delighted to have the MIGA managing director who's in the room, and I also want to have him recognized. Nonetheless, as we all know, and you have discussed about it earlier, the needs for climate finance are not billions of dollars, it's trillions of dollars. And that money is not going to come from 10,000 places. Public sector, meaning the government, has to mobilize, private sector, domestic and international, and also the international community for international finance inflows. And this can go hand in hand. And for that to materialize, we need to work with countries to help them be able to attract that financing and scale up that financing that comes to them. We need some instrument in terms of de-risking the risk, particularly when we're talking about private sector, and I think we should emphasize that. When we look at the climate agenda, most of the bulk of the spending is going to be mitigation. And that mitigation spending is a lot of opportunities, but you need to de-risk some of these projects to make sure that private sector money can flow. The adaptation part is going to be, you're doing adaptation is a local kind of issue pertaining to your community to adapt to the reality of climate. This may entail a lot of public sector funding, and that funding would also need for project to be identified. So when we did the country climate diagnostic report, and we have conducted 20 of these, and we have launched a couple of them. Like yesterday night, we launched a CCDR for Egypt. One of the main conclusions that comes from it is that we need to work around the nexus. And the nexus is really about what? Water, food, energy. We're dealing with climate, when you look at climate, we're dealing with three crises, which leads to security issues. Water security, food security, and energy security. And you need to deal with the three together. Egypt has launched the Nwafi initiative, which really showcases of what needs to happen. Now, when you have defined that framework, the next step is to make sure you have project. So one area where we need to work very solidly is really helping country to identify a sound, robust pipeline of projects, as my neighbor indicated earlier. And within that pipeline that you have put forward, then you need to have different sources of financing. And this is where I see a lot of merit for more projects to go Islamic finance, because there's huge needs out there, and the money is going to flow to the extent the projects are there to absorb the money. And we really need to mobilize around pipeline development, strengthening the capacity of government to do so, and de-risking private sector whenever it has to come in a very risky environment. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I think you put it in a way that it's more about innovative financing. It's more about looking at the real challenges and then to see what is best to tackle it. And I think all of the panel members have highlighted different aspects of that, be it at the country level, issuing green sukuk, or at MDB level, looking at the green and sustainability sukuk to help member countries to meet their commitments, or from the UNDP perspective, whereby we look into partnership to make more innovative projects on the ground and also utilize different instruments when it comes to Islamic finance and what UNEP have been doing, and the importance of the nexus. I think you put it very well. Before I turn into opening for questions, I would like to give the floor to you. Okay, you're fine. Or the MEGA director, if you would like to put something. Okay, that's great. So any questions from the floor or comments that you would like to add to this discussion? That was very efficient. Now we finished, I think, less than the time. Yes, please, yes. Yes, Excellency.
Well, excellent panel, very interesting. I was just wondering whether we can look at the possibility of providing an Islamic finance instrument that straddles both local and foreign currency money. Similar to a Masala bond that has been issued, I think, by Malaysia in the past. Could we consider something like that? Because it will certainly help us to mitigate on foreign exchange risks, which is one of the major risks that we currently face.
Yeah. Dr. Zamir, would you like to react?
Sure. I think this has already been done in a way that many member countries have already been issuing in the local currency. But what our experience has been when we discuss with the countries that any country to issue sukuk, they need to have a good infrastructure of capital markets. So if you have a good capital markets infrastructure and you have an active bond market, issuing sukuk becomes relatively easier and much better. And I agree with you that the sovereigns or the private sector, and I think both Indonesia and Malaysia are a very good example. We had a panel this morning on green bond, and we had someone from Malaysia who were telling us how actively they are in even helping the corporates tapping into sukuk market in the local currency, so they are immune. They are kind of immune from any FX risk. So answer is that yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. For that, our advice to the member countries is that they should have a ecosystem for the capital market, for the fixed income, for the bonds, as well as, and I think Paul can tell that at the World Bank, they have given many TAs to many countries, including in our, Islamic countries, to develop the capital markets or the sukuk market and help them issue sukuk. And for that matter, both Malaysia and Indonesia are quite pioneer in the green local currency sukuk. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Minister, I think this time around is a very difficult time for all of us. And then the dollar is becoming so expensive, and then countries are facing these global turmoils. Then what is I agree to what Dr. Zamil mentioned, and also would like to highlight what a colleague from the World Bank mentioned. Create good projects, and then package it, and then get the financing using the Islamic finance in the international market. Because what we are looking sometimes is the hedging, is the dollar hedging, right? We have this vulnerability here, but then we have a good project that we can securitize, we can package and everything. That requires the very detailed level of what kind of projects that can outreach to our investors. Now, the green investors, they would like to see green projects, good green projects, and then with all of the discussion about the taxonomy, the greenwashing, all of the stuff. Now, but then I think it's really up to us, usually the finance, to give guidance on our financing. So I think combining the Islamic finance, good projects, and then capital market, that's how I see the Islamic finance for the foreign exchange.
I mean, he said it all, because I think he summed it up. It's clearly you need an infrastructure for domestic capital market that allows the issuance of bond. You need to have good project, definitively. And more importantly, I think we also need to think about how to leverage on the asset that exists already. And I think one thing that we don't pay attention to is that most of the utilities that you're operating as government owns a lot of assets. And some of these assets are probably green. How do you leverage on that to go to the Sukuk market and raise money? I mean, we have a case in Jordan where the utility is receiving more funding from Islamic finance than what is receiving from commercial, conventional. And because I think they have been able to leverage on this through two dimensions. And I think it's a market that we could develop further. And I think there's a lot of valuable experience that exists already. And the last point I will mention is really the absolute necessity for government really to ramp up, the development of pipeline. And this is where I've seen the gaps years after years. We always discuss in meeting, money is never the issue, it's the project that are never there. And you have a lot of investment funds out there which are not disbursing because the bankable projects are not coming along. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add, Dr. Khalifa?
Yeah, maybe to complement. We don't give loans, so the question was not for me, but just to complement what he was saying, that within the initiative that we launched today, we will open a business line to develop bankable projects. Excellent. I think it's very important. And the money is there, yes, but if it's not followed by good quality projects that have impact at the end of the day, it doesn't lead anywhere. It will further burden the countries for not much impact. So we stand ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question? Yes?
Kier Kühner with Lingo. Paul has very rightly said that this is a climate emergency, and when we look at climate finance, there will be no amount of climate finance that is enough to deal with this emergency if we keep making things worse. And we know how much death and damage is associated with emissions. So for fossil fuel projects, we can quantify the damage associated with each barrel of oil extracted, with each ton of coal extracted and burned. For oil, it comes to about $175 of damages per barrel of oil. And much of that is also happening in the Islamic world. We know that the Middle East is very vulnerable, so a big portion of that damage is happening in the region. So my question to our experts on Islamic finance is whether we have answers to this urgent situation from an Islamic perspective on three fronts. The first is questioning fossil fuel investments, because as I understand, Islam does not promote unbalancing what God has created. So is there an Islamic case for questioning the balance that is being destroyed through fossil fuels at the moment? So that's the first area about questioning fossil fuel investments. The second one is supporting countries in not going down the fossil fuel route. There are lots of countries with energy needs, with needs of revenue that have fossil fuel reserves. Is there a case for Islamic finance to provide resources to keep those fossil fuels in the ground and help countries take a different route? We know there are these just energy transition partnerships. Maybe there could be a similar thing supported by Islamic finance. And the third area is for closing down existing fossil fuels. We know that we have to shut down coal early. For example, if we want to hold 1.5 degrees, we cannot continue for many decades burning coal. So is there a way, and we know it's economically more efficient today to build new solar plus storage than to keep the coal plants running. So is there a contribution that Islamic finance could make to countries that are burning coal today to shut that down early? Those are three areas that I'd be very keen to know how Islamic finance can help us unlock the situation where we knowingly create so much death and damage because there are no alternatives on the table. Thank you.
I don't know which one of you would like to take that question.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we can spend the whole day on these three questions. These are very loaded, but I'll try to give you a very brief answer from the IDB's perspective. First question is easy one, which is a kind of how about the teaching of Islam and other traditions as well. We emphasize on ethical and do no harm principles. So therefore, of course, the call for protection of environment is very much part of the Islamic teachings. So I think that answer is easy, and yes, I think people have written about it for a long time, and the realization is there. I think the second question is what we could do. So I'll talk about on terms of financing. From the MDB perspective, we work with the sovereigns, and depending on what sovereigns' priorities are, we cannot kind of force anything on them depending on their circumstances. But I can tell you, we at the IDB, we have a very clear climate action plan. And I'm very pleased to share that our target is by 2025, 35% of our financing would be in line with the Paris Agreement, which means that we will not be providing any financing for any of those fossil fuel and all those issues. And I'm very pleased to kind of share with you by 2021, we have already achieved at 31%. So what we are doing is exactly that, incorporating this climate action plan within our financing plans, and that indirectly sends a message to sovereigns that they need to kind of shift towards more renewable energy and more climate-friendly sources. So I'll stop here, and then maybe anyone else wants to.
Just you have 1 minute each to finalize, or less than 1 minute, because we have to conclude.
Let me just give you a brief logic of what Indonesia is doing. We are in a surplus of electricity, but that doesn't stop us from talking about, and most of our electricity is from coal and diesel fuel. But that does not stop us from talking about net zero emission 2060 or earlier. Okay, how should we do that? First, we have to create the demand for electricity, and we have to make sure some of our coal power plant is shut down earlier than what it is necessary. That requires some fund. That requires some commitment, that requires some investment, requires some financing. We call it the transition financing. So in line with what you mentioned, the energy transition mechanism, it is a transition financing that we have to come up with. Not only about building new renewables, but also about reducing the existing coal. This is where the international community should help us, should help the countries that are committed to do so. We have the agreement with Asian Development Bank. We'll be more than happy if other multilateral banks also joining in. Thank you.
And just to add to that comment, first of all, the focus on transition finance is very important because it's not only about the real green and the very ungreen, it's about everything in between. But I think that this new area of how we phase out assets and how you finance that is very, very important as well. And I would call on this new, the $24 billion commitment. I would hope that part of that would focus at new innovations about how that can be done effectively. I know IsDB has been working in that area, I think, with Indonesia and others, and would really need new innovations there. The private sector is keen to figure out how to do it, but seldom is it possible to do it on a purely private basis. We need some public-private cooperation.
Thank you very much. I would just like you to end up with a few words that I would like you to remember. So today we discussed about Islamic finance as an innovative way, an innovative approach for working in climate change-related matters, on low carbon and resilient development. We spoke about the importance of having pipelines, good projects from a government perspective, how to have an enabling environment for Islamic finance and for also resilient development, the importance of capacity development, and most importantly, that no one can do it alone. It's partnership. So everyone we have here, we have the government, we have MDBs, we have the UN, and we have also the private sector. Thank you very much. That was really a very efficient, I would say, panel. It was in a very short time we managed to get all these key messages through. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you very much for that very insightful panel. So on the topic of innovation, I would like to invite the participants in our second panel discussion to please take to the stage. Our panel discussion will be about an exciting new climate finance and energy innovation hub that the OPEC Fund has launched together with its partners at Sustainable Energy for All and the UN Capital Development Fund. Panelists, please take your seats. Thank you very much. Again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Thank you for joining us for the second panel discussion. I would just like to briefly introduce our panelists. His Excellency Ibrahim Matola, Minister of Energy for Malawi. Her Excellency Dr. Claudine Uwera, State Minister, next to me we have the Chief of Staff for President of Madagascar, Ms. Vainal Raharinrina. I hope I pronounced that correctly. From Sustainable Energy for All, we have Mr. Glenn Pierce Oroz, Senior Director of International Relations and Special Projects. From the UN Capital Development Fund, UNCDF, we have Mr. David Jackson, Director of Local Development Finance. And here by my side, I have my colleague, Ms. Shema Al-Shaibi, Senior Director of Strategic Planning and Economic Services at the OPEC Fund for International Development. So, if we could perhaps kick off with Shema, could you tell us a little bit about the OPEC Fund's recently announced Climate Finance Action Plan and how this new Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub that we'll be discussing today fits into the overall picture? Thank you, Shema.
Hello? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Nadia. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues. It's my honor to address you all here today as we begin a new era of implementation. As we've heard, it couldn't be more urgent. Historic floods in Asia, crippling drought in Africa, deadly heat waves in Europe, and devastating wildfires across Americas and Australia. I personally come from Saudi Arabia. From flash floods to droughts, my people have suffered. Sand and dust storms have hurt our children's health, destroyed our crop, and have made our communities yet even more vulnerable. OPEC Fund member countries, from east to west, from Indonesia to Nigeria, have not been spared the adversity either. So for our part, the OPEC Fund for International Development, we are fully committed to take on a stand at the front lines of global climate action in support of delivering on our joint SDGs. As our Director General mentioned earlier today, we adopted our Climate Action Plan in mid-September. It builds on decades of unique experience of the OPEC Fund, rooted in South-South cooperation, tackling energy poverty, and directing financing from our member countries to our partner countries exclusively in fulfillment of our mandate. Our plan focuses on three critical lines of action. First, it demonstrates a transformational shift from intent to full-scale implementation. We will support climate diagnostics, planning, and policies to enable policymakers to make decisions, to turn goals into concrete actions. Second, we will promote transformative climate investments to drive progress on adaptation and mitigation. Every project we will finance will cement progress on these critical work streams. Finally, in the third pillar, we will enable enhanced finance to flow to address the impacts. As a development finance institution that has built its model on amplifying impact through partnerships, we will work with our friends, with our partners, to transform the global financial architecture to render it fit for purpose in line with our climate agenda. Recent estimates project the targeted climate investments of $1.8 trillion from now until 2030 will generate $7.1 trillion of net benefit, a 400% return on investment. This forecast is an eye-opener. It's a challenge that can be turned into an opportunity, which is why, Nadia, I'm so enthusiastic about what we are launching here today, which is the OPEC Fund's new Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub. Working together with our partners from the United Nations Capital Development Fund and Sustainable Energy for All, you will hear from both of them today. The hub will be an end-to-end policy and finance framework that will leverage each $1 of finance to attract $4 of green and sustainable capital into projects. In the onset, we will focus on frontier markets, highly vulnerable economies like Madagascar and Malawi, and we have both excellencies available here with us today, where environmental degradation has really derailed the achievement of the SDGs. Through the hub, we'll identify gaps in green finance and private sector investments and help convert these into projects. Through innovative approaches, combining, for example, big data models with blended finance, we will de-risk projects, allowing private capital to flow. This will drive both inclusive growth as well as decarbonization. So where to start? Our immediate focus is actually on clean cooking, and there are many good reasons for this. First and foremost, of course, is health. As we know, 2.6 billion people around the world still depend on traditional cooking stoves. Women and children are suffering tremendously from burning fuels such as biomass, coal, and wood for cooking. Second is climate impact. By now we know that turning to clean cooking will reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 1 billion tons each year. And third, of course, is the huge financial gap that still remains. We are short of around $4.5 billion annually to ensure universal access to clean cooking by 2030. So clean cooking, as you all see, really does meet the COP27 theme head on, which is delivering for people and planet. This is why we've earmarked $100 million to take urgent action here. In fact, our first large-scale clean cooking project is about to start in Madagascar, where the need is especially acute, and you will hear from Her Excellency very soon to discuss that. And we'll be very soon replicating this in Malawi, Rwanda, as well as other countries. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you, Shema. So on that note, I'd like to immediately turn to my honored colleague from Madagascar. So obviously we have a joint project on clean cooking. Could you tell us a little bit about the challenge of climate action and energy access? What role, why cooking is so important, but just generally what your expectations going forward are and what the primary needs are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank first the OPEC Fund for this invitation. So I just want to remind first that Madagascar represents 5% of the biodiversity in the world, and also we are facing for 60 years now a huge rate of deforestation. And I also want to remind that only 8% of the population is using now clean cooking energy. So 92% of population is still using charcoal, and 400,000 tons per year of charcoal is consumed in Madagascar. You know what does it mean for the deforestation. The importance of this program of clean cooking energy for Madagascar is first for public health, for the forests, primary forests mainly, and also for the engagement, the commitment of Madagascar on decreasing deforestation and also on the adaptation and mitigation. The main thing I want to point out is that the hub will be supporting Madagascar's climate action in many respects. So this idea of holistic program with environmental, social, but also economic dimension with the access to finance, and also the fact that we work with the public and private, and also the fact that the OPEC Fund helps many stakeholders working together on the issue of the access of clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to now turn to our partner at Sustainable Energy for All, Glenn. So I know Sustainable Energy for All has been working specifically with countries on how to translate SDG 7 into concrete plans of action for climate. Could you tell us a little bit about your work in this arena? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here on behalf of Sustainable Energy for All to partner with OPEC Fund on this Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub, and to link it a bit to the previous discussion that we heard on Islamic finance. We need good projects. The money which is being committed is excellent to have, but it may not go very far unless there are good projects. which is why one of the messages that we're consistently sharing in different conversations is we need to pay attention to the analytics, to the planning that has to take place, to the capacity building, to the policy and regulations that need to be reformed, to creating markets. In other words, there's an entire enabling environment, and I know that we're all familiar with this. There's an entire enabling environment that needs to be addressed. And so what we've been doing is working with many country partners on a few tools which help to line up this type of work which will allow the funds to flow. The Integrated Energy Planning Tool, the IEP tool, is something that we just recently launched in partnership with the government of Malawi in Lilongwe about 3 weeks ago, Honorable Minister. And I know that we were working very closely with your government and with your ministry on this Integrated Energy Planning tool, which essentially provides all the data on the location of every household in the country in terms of demographics, in terms of energy consumption, prospective energy consumption, in terms of access rates, who has access, who doesn't. And the innovative part about this IEP tool is that we're not only addressing electrification, but also clean cooking, which was one of the points that, one of the entry points that we see in terms of this raising ambition. So the Integrated Energy Planning tool is going to be extremely important to raise ambition, to organize the effectiveness of what can be the impact of this climate finance and energy innovation hub. The second tool, which we're working on now, is the Energy Transition Planning tool with different countries. We've done this now with Nigeria. Nigeria has an energy transition plan that was launched earlier this year, which identified the different investments that are required for Nigeria to transition to a net zero economy by 2060, identified $410 billion that are needed over the next 40 years. This is extremely important analytical data, costing data, which allows Nigeria now to start looking at projects and then therefore financing of those projects. Again, the point that was made in the earlier session. We're engaging now with Ghana, we're engaging now with a few other countries on these energy transition plan, and this is the next step, I believe, that will be helpful for the Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub to really gain traction and make an impact.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, that immediately leads us to a segue to His Excellency, the Minister of Energy from Malawi. I know that your country has committed to accelerating policies and programs addressing the impact of climate change. So from your perspective, how can the international development community better deliver on the needs that you face at the country level? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to speak on the Climate Finance and Innovation Hub at this event. Coming from Malawi, which is an African country and one of the least developing countries, LDCs, and in fact, chair of LDCs, I'll strive to represent the aspirations of both my country and those of LDCs. It is my sincere hope that discussions at this event will provoke and stimulate a call to policy action on how African countries and LDCs can leverage the use of capital or debt markets which climate finance for the promotion of a green environment, mitigation and adaptation of climate change, resilience, sustainable development, and energy transition. African countries and LDCs, such as Malawi, require large-scale investments to address the devastation consequences of climate change and to be resilient against future occurrences and for energy transition. Ironically, African countries and LDCs who have contributed the least to climate change have the least access to affordable climate finance. For instance, in 2019-2020, of the total climate finance provided, estimated at $632 billion, only 3% flew to sub-Saharan Africa. To be specific, of the total climate finance provided and mobilized by developed countries for developing countries, amounting to $79.6 billion in 2019, only $15.4 billion went to LDCs. The situation of access to finance is also even more complex in the African region. In the wake of the global socio-economic havoc wreaked by COVID-19 and the worsening fiscal situation, fiscal space for the region has shrunk and the situation of the public finances has deteriorated. To this end, the region's fiscal deficits are growing rapidly, and as of 2020, public debt to GDP ratios had risen to 57.3% in sub-Saharan Africa and to 88.7% in Northern Africa. The borrowing costs for LDCs have risen substantially, and countries have faced growing difficulties to obtain financing on international markets due to high external debt levels and poor credit ratings. This is one of the reasons LDCs continue to have the lowest access to affordable finance for the fight against climate change. To make matters worse, the inadequate financing available to these countries is channeled towards social services as opposed to productive investment. The need for scaling up access to affordable climate financing for the LDCs can therefore not be overemphasized. The discussions at this event are therefore very important because it is now imperative that action is taken to increase African countries and LDCs' access to affordable climate finance to invest in mitigation, adaptation, resilience, environmental management, and energy transition. We must, without delay, on an individual and collective basis, develop innovative financing mechanism to finance climate ambition. I'll quote the African proverb that one hand cannot clap. In Arabic, they say, Al-yadu wahidu la tusaffaq. We need to work hand in hand. This is time for action. And climate change is real. وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. This should be taken as a call from the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we should save the humankind. You can't talk about health without energy. You can't talk about education without talking about energy. And you can't talk about agriculture. My father, my forefather was a peasant, and today my father is a peasant. If we are talking about commercial agriculture and value adding, we need to invest a lot in energy. Time has come that we should support one another. And for us to take it as a charitable work, which we are doing in order to save the nations, we need to work together. On the other hand, it is important for African countries and LDCs to develop workable frameworks to help tap into international climate finance. There is a need to come up with some actions to leverage capital or debt markets to meet climate ambitions for these countries. The actions, for instance, could include the creation of conducive investment environments, improving credit ratings, and strengthening the market infrastructure required for capital or debt markets. The actions indeed lie within the countries. All that is needed is a concerted effort to collectively harness these opportunities. The countries may, of course, require policy and technical support to secure and improve their credit ratings to access financing from capital or debt markets. In conclusion, I must say that I am very hopeful that our discussions at this event will result in takeaways that are realistic and actionable for the benefit of African countries and the LDCs in their quest for an increase in access to affordable climate finance to meet commitments in their respective nationally determined contributions and for energy transition. I thank you all.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. So energy is, of course, closely related to urbanization, and I know urbanization in Africa is a focus area for my colleague, Mr. Jackson, from the UN Capital Development Fund. Can you tell us, David, why is urbanization in Africa a key topic for climate financing?
I most certainly can, and we really look forward to partnering on the hub with Sustainable Energy for All and with this very exciting innovation. And I think Africa is rapidly becoming an urban continent. That is clearly the case. And I'm very happy that the hub is starting looking at the issue of clean cooking. And I'm looking forward to working with the hub to expand its approach so that we can cover the energy needs, the innovative energy needs of Africa moving forwards. There are a variety of very exciting opportunities that open up when one considers the physical location of the increasing numbers of African people in urban settlements. One opens up the opportunity for solar. One opens up the opportunity for, with regard to clean cooking, for industrial briquettes made from waste to energy. One opens up the opportunity even and for micro hydro, and there's a big expansion in technology where relatively small drops in water level can generate quite a significant amount of hydroelectricity. And we believe that the energy transition plans will enable us to look into the future at the changing demographic reality and to calculate the clean cooking requirements and the energy requirements for such an energy transition, and to be able to, from our perspective, look at what would be the de-risking mechanisms that would need to be introduced, not just for today's energy requirements, including clean cooking, of course, but also for tomorrow's, because the climate models are now pretty reliable. If you go back 10 years and input the data of what has happened, you'll get today's climate. So we know what is going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. We also know that we are likely to hit 1.5 degrees, and we know that that is classified as being a very serious problem. We also know the demographic trends, and we know what countries will look like in 10 to 15 years. So I think what will be very important to do with the hub, and this is where it will be really innovative, is to get ahead of this curve. And from our perspective at UNCDF, to look at how you start to de-risk, how we can deploy technical assistance, seed capital. We are working with the European Union on applications for guarantee facilities, how we can employ layered finance with concessional tranches to enable Africa, also globally, but Africa in particular, because when we're looking at the frontier economies, I think that's where we're going to start, to be able to meet its energy challenges moving forward into the future. And it's not one size fits all, and nor is it business as usual. And so I think this is a critical moment with the announcement of this new money available, and we're extremely grateful for that. And we believe now is the opportunity to think outside the box a little bit, get ahead of the curve, and make sure that we're able to meet the energy transition in these rapidly urbanizing, industrializing countries in such a way that they are able to become climate resilient and adapt. They are really facing a triple challenge: the challenge of urbanization, the challenge of increasing productivity, and we heard about that in the first session, the need for development, and also the challenge of becoming climate resilient and becoming green. So that's like three combinations, and we have to see it as a package. So I'm very excited and delighted to be partnering on this, this hub. And I believe that we will be able to use our financing instruments as UNCDF to come up with these innovative models that work. And just finally, what is the function of UNCDF? What do we bring to this partnership? So as the UN financing hub, we are able to test out guarantees, loans, commercial loans, concessional, what we call reimbursable financing agreements, which are effectively zero interest loans, grants, seed capital grants, structuring of special purpose vehicles that can carry debt, various experiments with equity, experiments with renewable and distributed energy as on the SE4ALL model and for cook stoves. We can test these things out in a sandbox and see what works, what can go to scale, both in terms of the policy requirements and in terms of the market requirements. And we're really looking forward to collaborating on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. So we had very much hoped for a lively discussion and to also take some questions from the audience, but we are also very much over time. So I would like to encourage everyone to stop by the OPEC Fund Pavilion. We will have a reception at 3:30, but we'll be here for the full 2 weeks. Please come by with your questions, and we will hope to engage further with you. But if I could just wrap up very briefly what we've heard here today. Obviously, financing gaps are huge, so financing is needed. An enabling environment needs to be created, and more importantly, one hand cannot clap. We need to work hand in hand. So on that note, I'd like to give the final word to my colleague Shema. Where do we start in practice?
Thank you, Nadia. And thank you all for being here with us. So as you can see, we're all around this table convinced that the Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub is the right tool at precisely the right time. And that's why we're calling on everybody to support it. All the MDBs, all the philanthropies, all the co-financiers, because I think that this is the natural way to support countries such as Madagascar, Malawi, and other LDCs achieve their SDG 7. Innovation and partnerships between sovereign and non-sovereign entities, between multilateral development bank and philanthropies, will play a pivotal role to really transform the global financial architecture, to mobilize the needed resources, particularly in frontier economies. Under the hub, with our partners, we have created a trust fund, an energy access and transition trust fund, and call on all our partners to join. Because as we've heard, one hand cannot clap. We cannot have implementation unless we all come together. Thank you all very much.
And thank you to our panelists. Thank you, distinguished guests.